Hello,
Okay, we're
everybody.
live.
Oh, hello, everybody. Welcome to tonight's Specialized Learning Subcommittee meeting. It is May 23rd at 5:33 p.m. And I am joined by Mary Ellen Flaherty Ludwig and Erica DePalma from the Board of Ed, as well as Rob Pennington and Bridget Adams. And I think we're just going to roll right into it and get a nice summary of the year. And I'll turn it over to Mr. Pennington to start to see if he has any opening words.
So we are coming to the end of May at this point, and this is Ms. Adams' first year as the Executive Director of Specialized Learning. And so today's subcommittee is really going to focus on a CT SpEd summary because this was our first year of implementation, and really some year-end reflections, and we'll start to talk a little bit about next year. I know that a lot of those components will be in our end of the year report, Dr. Estrella's report, but she will give a quick overview from her first year as the executive director. So without further ado, I'm going to turn the floor over to Ms. Adams.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. And thank you also, Deirdre McKinnon, the Ed Admin for Specialized Learning, for joining us tonight. I think that if you'll indulge me, I'd like to take a moment just to thank Deirdre for being my right hand everything this year. Certainly, there isn't much that was accomplished without her support, assistance, and tireless efforts, including the development of many of the subcommittee presentations. So thank you, Deirdre, for being part of the show tonight, and welcome everyone. I'm happy to be back together again, and I look forward to having a conversation, certainly as with other conversations that we've had. While I'll be presenting a great deal of information, I welcome any dialogue, any discourse, questions. Certainly, if I can answer them more succinctly toward the end, I'm happy to do that, but let's just engage in the work together. And thank you so much for the opportunity. Rob gave us an overview of the agenda. Thank you so much. And we like to start every conversation with just our restating or reviewing. I won't read through the beliefs of specialized learning. These become not only our belief statements, but that which creates the vision that we all work together to create for our students. And our vision of specialized learning is the vision of Norwalk Public Schools. This slide with some updated photos, I thought it would be great to include some images from the work of our assistive tech specialists who you met in an earlier month. I think it may have been last month, but time is blurry at times. Angela Rinaldi shared with us really exciting work that's occurring throughout the district as it relates to assistive technology and augmentative communication devices. And here you see in the images, and Sarah, and for folks who are unable to see these images, we have a classroom that is engaging with a smart board. And on the smart board are stories, social stories, text, literature that the students are engaging with. Also through manipulatives, there is a text related to receiving mail, the teacher's holding a mailbox, and the young people are engaging in delivery of mail and receipt of letters. They're reviewing letters on a second slide, and it's visible to see a young person with an AAC device that is utilized for communication. And on the right is a zoom of that tech tool that allows that individual to select the words and phrases that the device then makes audible so that this individual can communicate. It's pretty exciting. And throughout other subsequent pictures that I'm happy to share, we have actually two people using them. Almost every student uses the device at some point. So it's really exciting that when an individual has this accommodation, it is and can be something that all students use. So thank you for taking the moment to look into our classrooms this evening. And of course, the specialized learning mission, that of the district. And so as we talk about CT SEDS, it's been a conversation that we have had throughout the year. I've hoped to keep everyone updated as best I was able. Certainly there are growing pains, and it has been a pretty difficult shift from a system that we've used for a very long time to one that is new to most of us. We did learn that this product is used successfully in other states. Connecticut has some very specific parameters just for our state that were important to be built into our platform. But we have met a few teachers this year who are familiar with it. They've come from out of state and it was old hat. So that was really exciting to learn that we had experts beyond anything that we could fathom to claim to be expert in. One of the struggles of the program that we talk about quite often is that each of us, teachers, administrators, parents, are looking for support and guidance in using the platform. And because it is so unique, there aren't expert trainers who can come from somewhere and provide training as we knew it when we adopted Frontline. When we moved to IEP Direct, the folks from Frontline were very familiar with the product. They were able to send individuals out to train us and to very carefully teach us this process. What we now know 10 months, almost 12 months in, is that many of what have been referred to as glitches, errors, whammies is a new term, issues ultimately with the program, there weren't necessarily solutions, and those solutions had to be developed by the programmers as we were using this product. And while we're in quite a successful place, as evidenced by the fact that every annual and reevaluation that has come due since the first day of school is now entered into CT SEDS. And we're learning about our compliance monitoring that is inherent within the program and how to utilize that tool to ensure that we are writing a compliant IEP. Some will share their very strong opinions about CT SEDS, and I'm happy for it. As a director of a department, it's important to me that teachers tell me the truth, that they share with me how they're feeling, that they engage in conversation about their experiences and the frustrations that they feel because of this platform, because it is only through them sharing that I'm able to work with our partners to find support and help for them. And if I had a wish in reflection, it would be that there had been better avenues for us to get help sooner. And while that wasn't always possible, I think that together we have come very, very far in mastering the system. I think also there are some teachers who share a sentiment that I have, which is that I actually love this program. It took a while to fall in love, but once I did, it was deep and real. What this program does for us is incredibly important and has caused, I think, every special educator to some degree to refine their practice. As I'm working in the system, I'll find that I'm unable to do what I thought was supposed to be done, only to learn that I was only able to complete that task because the former system allowed it. And in fact, I shouldn't have ever done it. And I'm not talking necessarily about broad strokes denial of FAPE in any way. What I'm talking more about are indications that get put into the system. And I'll use a very concrete example. When we enter dates into the system, we have to do it in the exact order in which they occur. Whereas in the old system, I could sit on day 3 after a PPT and enter the entire process in advance of the 5th day it being mailed to a family. Those days are gone. I can't work out of order. I have to follow the exact process. And what that does is keep me very much on task with the IEP writing process, which ultimately leads to a better quality IEP. And that's just the technical side. We know that through our quality IEP training for all staff, we talked about education benefit and writing IEPs that increase inclusion, that increase access to typical peers, and that decrease that pullout opportunity where students are separated from either the group, their class, their school. And the quality IEP training helped us all, whether veteran teachers refresh our knowledge or new teachers practice our new skills in identifying appropriate present levels, how those present levels inform the goals, in that every concern that we identify through data have a goal associated, and then we determine the services from the numbers of goals. We determine what is necessary to help students meet those goals in an amount of time. We dovetail that quality IEP training into the technical piece, and the product becomes a very compliant IEP and an appropriate program. I don't have hard data to support this reflection, but it is my sense, and I hope to look toward that data in the very near future, that we are a more compliant district as a result of CT SEDS and the blood, sweat, and tears that goes into working in this new program. We have provided multiple training opportunities for everyone that is involved in the work. We've talked previously, we secured a grant from the state in the amount of $31,500 solely to support teachers having time to work in the system. Any new system takes longer than the one we knew. I may have shared in the past that I could, after years and years of working in IEP Direct, write an IEP in about an hour, hour and a half time. Of course, that's not without review. And my first IEP and CT SEDS, it felt like took 3 weeks. So as we learn the new system, the knowledge of writing the IEP, of course, is still in my mind, but the time to adapt is something that we need to support and honor. And I would say even more so than we've done. And I look for ways to do that. Just recently on Friday, we had an expert from PCG who is a former expert from Frontline. So it was a really interesting perspective to learn from her. She presented 3 2-hour sessions to our teachers and related service providers on using this system. And interestingly, the majority of the session that I was able to sit in had nothing to do with actually writing the IEP. Rather, it was about setting up the student in the system, because so much of those dates and that setup process speaks to the ease of use for the rest of the document. So we look forward to learning from her more. The department participated in weekly meetings just for Norwalk Public Schools. Deirdre and I attended many of them. Our administrator of related service attended each, as we look to shift from an internal system of Medicaid support and billing to one that is supported by CT SEDS. Our data manager, Donna Patchen, has been fearless through this whole process. And there are emails that are shared. They're called NPS CT SEDS or CT SEDS at NPS norwalkpublicschools.org. Those are really Donna in code. And she is the person who has been doing so much of the troubleshooting and responding to our staff who are working in the system. We, together with Donna, have attended sometimes twice weekly support sessions for statewide groups, and our teachers are invited to those, our related service providers are invited to those. And we, at the end of this time, have shifted to Medicaid billing, progress monitoring, IEP writing, and we're looking forward to successfully entering and following through the system for all 504 plans in process. And our RTI system, while a bit out of my wheelhouse, my partner in the referral process, the RTI system will live in CT SEDS as well next year. We are one of the pilot districts in the state of Connecticut. So that's very exciting work that Rob also supervises.
Yeah, I'll add in there that Dr. Perry is really excited to build out this platform with our improvement teachers so that we will be able to have this continuum and really be able to track and have this data warehouse so that if we have students who are switching schools, it's a very seamless process versus trying to create our own data records or data sheets, which we've done, but to have it all housed in one concrete system, I think will be really positive for us.
And I think that really speaks to one of our goals of coherence, in that families will also be able to expect a similar product. What is generated for an IEP will look like what's generated for a 504, will look like what is generated for the RTI process. And of course, all three of those systems work very closely together if a student is transitioning from one to the other for any reason. So I look forward to having all of these data systems create these documents that families can become part of and grow accustomed to. Would you like me to pause and engage in any conversation about CT SEDS, or should I?
Yes.
Okay, of course.
I have a couple questions. Just going backwards, Rob just mentioned that this was going to be expanded to the improvement teachers. And in that sense, just asking the improvement teachers work with kids that have not done so well on the statewide tests, but they're not necessarily IEP students. So we can broaden it
So this will be, there for students who are in the SRBI process, this will be like, it's a subsequent portion of the platform that will not be, it's not about students who are who have an IEP. It's really set up to track students who are in the SRBI process. So
Okay,
the SRBI process is a formal process. And so you might be a student who's receiving tier 2 interventions, and this will track the data collection for those tier 2 interventions, because every 6 weeks they're coming back to say, how is the student doing? Is the student making progress? And all of that data will be housed in CT SEDS. Right now, we have data sheets and data trackers that our improvement teachers have been using Excel sheets or Google Sheets to track and collect all of that information. And now it will be housed in one platform that will be able to be used. And yes, there's going to be some training that has to be involved for our improvement teachers, but this is outside of students with IEPs. This is going to be like it would be like a different tab in the system. And it's not for students with IEPs, it's for students who are in SRBI.
Right. So that's that I see the huge advantage of having all of the students that we are tracking for improvement, whether they're identified or not identified. And then, as Bridget was just saying, some students will be transitioning from one to another, upwards or downwards, depending on the situation and what the kid is going through. But then everyone will be in the same system. This seems like
and I would say it's not even an upward or downward movement necessarily. It's more lateral.
Go ahead. In what way?
So I don't perceive IEP 504 or RTI as, well, I suppose if we're talking about the tiers of intervention, it can seem like a ladder rather than the pyramid, but having an IEP isn't necessarily less than having a 504, which is necessarily more than having RTI. It's rather, what is it that an individual needs and what safeguards are embedded to ensure that they have that. Does that make sense? So if an individual requires accommodation or specialized learning, or rather, if they require accommodation, modification, and specialized learning, they may have an IEP. If they require merely accommodation, but not modification, they might have a 504. If they require some remediation, or also we often talk about response to intervention as needing remediation, but RTI can also mean that a student needs protraction. And we look at the other side of that triangle and they need to be enriched. And
Right.
so the question isn't necessarily about a upward or downward movement, but rather a where do I need to be to get what I need to ensure that I can access all that I need to access in the curriculum.
So what I'm going for is, I like it. I think it's hugely positive that you are looking at the individual student as fluid in the educational setup. There may be rough spots a child might go through, and they would need to be in a different bucket for what they needed then. So this seems to address
If
that
it's
to a
even
degree.
rough, yeah, I think that sometimes it's, I often will use myself as an example. Had I accumulated the concussions as a young person that I have now that have resulted in migraine, I may have needed a 504 solely for the reason that I need the lights low. You often see me sitting in the dark because the fluorescents trigger migraine for me. And so that's not necessarily negative, it just is. And so I think when we think that way about any individual, what is, when we name it, we can say, okay, here are the safeguards that protect you so that you get exactly what you need for whatever that thing is. And so I'm thrilled that this district is so invested in ensuring that we do have coherence for all three systems, and that we are looking at every individual all of the time and saying sometimes you've exited special education because you no longer require those safeguards and you have the opportunity for a 504. Perhaps you require a leveled tier intervention behaviorally. You could live
right.
in all three over time. And it's just who you are and where you are in that moment. And collectively, Norwalk ensures that there is a system to support you.
I see. My second question, and that this is all I've got, is prior to entering this Connecticut SEDS, was there evidence that we were putting together IEPs that were non-compliant?
So I think historically, everywhere there are issues of compliance. It is why we embedded here in Norwalk the compliance monitor. This is an incredibly litigious process that is wrought with rules and expectations within these documents. And as a special ed teacher, there were errors in my IEPs. And that is why I would always ask for someone to review my document, much like in university, when we're writing a paper, you ask somebody else to read it because you can't proof your own work. So ultimately, yes, there are IEPs that had technical edits, and sometimes IEPs that had errors. And Norwalk infused a position, an element of the role for a person to be highly trained and become a compliance monitor, to monitor those documents to ensure that they were compliant before going out, being published to families. The state also has had levels of compliance assurity built in. We often talked about the CDAC process, and the state systems of compliance monitoring would then communicate with districts and say, here are the places where we're finding errors that perhaps you missed. Here is the corrective action. Please correct these errors and then resubmit. And so here, I remember as a supervisor, there were times where I would receive a case from another school, another district, and my first task with a new case was to review that IEP and ensure it was compliant. And I ask teachers in our district to do the same at the beginning of the school year or when a student comes to their class. As a special educator, it's my expectation that each reads that document very closely to ensure that it is compliant, so that if I do need to call the parent and say, I have some confusion about something that's written on this document, would you help me understand your thinking around it? And together, let's ensure that this is accurate so that we are always providing FAPE. So human error occurs. Yeah, Mary Ellen, to your point, it does. But there are so many systems and levels of support to ensure that we are compliant. And this system really is taking the lion's share of that human power out of it. There's still human error. I make them daily, but we've got another level of system that's going to support us in being compliant, which is so important. Because once we're compliant, we can focus on all of the other work that needs to be done. Yeah, you got it. Implement
do it. So just that the thought then is you are getting everything in line and feeling more confident about what you're doing. But I can appreciate and I want to commend the work that all of the special ed teachers must have done to master this imperfect tool. You've mentioned frustration in your presentation. I am sure it was acute at times when you're trying under a time constraint to get stuff in and then it doesn't work, not because you've made a mistake, but the actual tool needs to be rejiggered. So I do commend you for that. And thank you for explaining the overreaching idea.
Absolutely.
I do keep in mind that this is a legal document. So that's what the fuss is about. We are required by law to follow it. And so the document better be in good shape.
You got it. You got it. That is the work. That is the work and the pressure and the stress. But our staff are incredible. And I don't know that we find enough ways and times and spaces to tell them that every day they show up and get back in the system and keep doing this, all the while ensuring that students have what they need. That this, if ever there was a year to celebrate special educators in Connecticut, it's this one.
Wow.
And so I think you bring up a great point, Mary Ellen, that I'm really glad you did, because I realized I didn't acknowledge this. The state's intent is to bring all teachers into the conversation. So as we talk about our goals that we've met this year and that we reach for next year, as we look at mindset, as we look at this concept that special ed is a service, it's not a place you go, it's not a platform we live in, and we become coherent in our systems, the state's supporting that in that they believe that this is our opportunity to engage all teachers. And general ed teachers are teachers of record for individuals with IEPs. Therefore, it's important that they become part of this conversation around compliance and understanding the development of the IEP, ultimately, so that together we're implementing the program that's developed in that document. So we're looking forward to learning from the state of Connecticut the rollout of the quality IEP training for general ed teachers across the state. As they're preparing that, they've just published today, and we shared with our teachers in district, that they're also offering a small stipend for teachers' attendance at workshops this summer. So every teacher who attends will get a small stipend, and it will give them the opportunity to sit in small groups and talk through their concerns and their questions about the CT SEDS platform. And all of that, to your point, is to say, it's a document that gives us guidance to do this work. And as we look at a year in review, we're having conversations, and I'm going to talk very briefly because you're going to be hearing from me again in short order as we come together as a district to review our year's goals and look forward to next year. But each of the actions and the steps and the moves that we take as leaders so that our teachers can be successful, so that our students make progress, live in these worlds of mindset and believing that all students can and will learn, and that they have the right to learn in their environment, right? And that we create the appropriate environment for them. So to that end, we've talked quite a bit here, and you heard a bit from Jamie Granite, who's done a good amount of work with her co-teaching partners. She's led a professional learning opportunity this spring for principals. We're really moving toward this, well, not even toward, I rather use the word through the work of co-teaching, because it's not new and we're not headed toward it. Norwalk's been doing it. How do we co-teach even better, with more efficacy, with more success for more students? And so in thinking of the mindset as it relates to inclusion, what are all the ways and spaces that we can do this work? And so together with co-teaching, we look to increase teacher capacity in scaffolding the curricula. I reflect back to the beginning of this school year, and one of the first questions posed to me was, are you bringing a special ed curriculum from Bridgeport? And I think I've laughed with you and shared that it was a moment missed, because really there is no special ed curriculum. The curriculum is the special ed curriculum. It's all one curricula. And so what's necessary is that we practice universal design and we engage in conversations about appropriate scaffolds so that everybody can access that curriculum. Because special education is not a place. It's not where you go to get something and put it in your pocket and come back. It happens through service in every place. And as we increase inclusion, working with all of our programs to help support our students having access to typical peers throughout their school day, access to the curriculum. We bring the curriculum to specialized programs. We bring the students out of the rooms of specialized programs in and throughout the school. The Literacy Center, as you know, is no longer a center. It's an idea that is implemented throughout the district, through classes, through small groups. We have our experts teaching lab or holding labs, much like I think of a medical residency where teachers can come and watch them teach. We have consultation and coaching and modeling and training, and all of the service of the work that once was a place is now throughout the district. And we continue to talk with building leaders about scheduling and identification of appropriate services so that we do increase inclusion. And one of the best ways to get better is to get better at being better. And we do that through procedures that are clear, that are consistent, and that share that belief. Over the course of this year, we have developed or refined systems that either existed or needed to exist. Some of them are listed here in this slide, and we have identified systems that we will focus on as we move through the summer and into next year. Consistent work group sessions among special ed administrators have helped with this work. And we look now to the work that we've done regarding standards-based instruction to inform our work as we move forward. Let's dive into the numbers a bit. Before we do, I want to talk about where the numbers came from. We are looking at a preliminary data set. If you were to look on EdSite, you would find the two tables that are shaded blue. These numbers are drawn from a PSIS, it's the state system of where all the student data is held, at the beginning of October. In special education, we talk about the October 1 child count. That is a counting of students with disabilities that, interestingly, while taken on October 1, because of the new system, was not reported until the beginning of May. So it is the May reporting of the October 1 child count, and it is those numbers that will be adjusted in EdSite, in the report card, and in all of the data presentations as we move forward. The current data for the child count is suppressed. It is not ready for publication by the state, but we were afforded the opportunity to share with boards of education what the targeted expected numbers are But I say all of this with asterisk and fanfare that these numbers should not be written in stone. This is target information that will be used. We were able to use that child count information, that not the suppressed, but what was published. Hello, friend, in order to inform our work with the application for our IDEA grant moving into next year. So very briefly, we're looking at a historical record of the number of individuals within our school district, those with IEPs and those without on the top. On the bottom right, this is October of this year, preliminarily, our individuals in district disaggregated by race and ethnicity. And then we have our numbers of our totals. Special ed numbers, and I think we talked about this in an earlier conversation in this forum. There are two numbers that are published. One is the total number of individuals with an IEP, which you see there as 1,845. And then there is a second number, and that's the number that is used in many of our reports. And we have to be sure to ask the question, are we talking about total number of students with an IEP or school-aged individuals with an IEP? School-aged precludes pre-K and some kindergartners, because those are students ages 3 to 5. There is an asterisk there that says 65. That number came from one poll, and there was an updated number of 239. Students in pre-K, the total numbers are very hard to name because they change very rapidly as we welcome the referral process for students from birth to 3 every month based on their birth month. So those numbers change and fluctuate. So please just keep that one in italics and off to the side. This is here for reference. And as always, feel free to come back and enjoy the data. This shows us our historical eligibility since the 17-18 school year. And with a deep dive into this data, we can look at trends. Given the time that we don't have together tonight, I am going to leave this here for us to view and then re-engage in conversation, but dive a little bit into it with a visual representation to see the trends related to the eligibility classifications. We're going to find in the next slide that some of the classifications, I don't offer specific current numbers because any group under 10, we don't publicize. And so this is here for you to see. Evidently, our learning students with specific learning disability, inclusive of learning disability, dyslexia, is increasing. Our SLI numbers are decreasing, which actually brings joy to my heart. And I'll talk about that in a moment. Our emotional, it indicates here in this graph, emotional disturbance. And I will make note for the record that we no longer refer to this classification. This is an outdated slide because this is our data from last year. As of July 1, this classification is emotional disability. So it is language that we are shifting everywhere. Again, these are numbers that are accounted for on October 1 with the child count. This is not that same data pull from the preliminary data that was 3 slides ago that is reported on EdSite currently. This is from the special ed side of the house. And all of the numbers, once they are no longer suppressed, will land in the actuals, and those will all be published in all of those places. But we like to use the numbers we have to guide our work. And we look at these daily, hourly. Deirdre and I were reviewing our out-of-district numbers 2 hours and 12 minutes ago. So we spend a lot of time in real time in our numbers. So I've actually provided for you the out-of-district snapshot from today. What this graph on the right shows is the areas of eligibility that were on the previous slide, and this disaggregates those groups throughout our district. Important to note that with learning disability, 103 of the 814 at October 1 specifically are eligible for SLD dyslexia. We watch these eligibility categories very, very carefully, and we work tirelessly with our teams to ensure that we are identifying accurately and appropriately. In Dr. Fergus's report of 2021, the 2020-2021 school year, he shared some of the disproportionality data that exists in our district. There are two areas that I came into district having done a deep data dive and kind of an organizational diagnosis in preparing for taking this job. And in reviewing that, I learned that we are not disproportionate by the IDEA standard for the number of individuals who are identified as speech language impaired and who are Hispanic. However, we are dangerously close, or we were a year ago. And we watch that very carefully. The work of the MLL department together with the SRBI team has done great work of ensuring that we are not misrepresenting individuals as speech language impaired where there are multiple languages spoken. And that has been a true target of Norwalk Public Schools to ensure. It is why when I shared that number decreasing warms my heart, because the right work is occurring. That's evidence of that. And I truly look forward to our data this year. A second area is in the eligibility criteria of emotional disability. Dr. Fergus's report also shared that it is alarming, and this is not Norwalk specific. This is statewide, this is nationwide. The number of Black and Hispanic boys who are identified as having emotional disability is alarming. We don't meet the criteria of disproportionate through IDEA, but again, we watch and monitor closely. My staff, families, you may have learned, or you will, that I am incredibly passionate about this, ensuring that we are appropriately identifying. If we are doing that and we fall disproportionate, that's going to be okay if we can live in the truth that this is accurate referral. That's what I want to know at all times that we're doing. And that's important because the days of label are gone. Again, Mary Ellen, kind of to your point, you get the IEP because it's what you need, right? And it comes chock full of a program that's appropriate for you. But we must do our due diligence to ensure that we are identifying children appropriately and giving them the services that they do require and not disabling them when we shouldn't be. And we know that systemic racism lives within our work, and we need to monitor ourselves very, very carefully and cautiously as we look at these eligibility criteria, because individuals with disability are a protected class. And given those rights that they have, we strive to do right in creating equity for everyone. I'll just quickly note, but I know you can read and see that, but Sarah, forgive me, you're on the phone. There is a category that is just identified as other disabilities by the state. This is inclusive of each eligibility criteria that is not listed here. So the buckets we see are learning disability, intellectual disability, emotional disability, speech and language impairment, other health impairment, autism, and then other disabilities are grouped together so as to not identify individuals. This includes visual impairment, including blindness, deafness, hearing impairment, deafblindness, orthopedic impairment, traumatic brain injury, and multiple disabilities, which is often a combination of intellectual disabilities and others. I've also broken down in the right-hand column our current out-of-district students by eligibility. information, the more we know, the better equipped we are. This is our projected prevalence rate for next year, for this year, sorry, that will be reported out for the 22-23 school year based on that October 1 count. While our prevalence rate has increased from 14.6 to 15.1%, we also know that our population has increased, and the state prevalence rate, we continue to follow that same trend, and we can see that the state prevalence rate is 16.7. Again, the actual numbers are suppressed. It is possible that you will see an adjustment. So what do we do with the data? Rob said yesterday in a conversation that he hears me say all of the time, what data supports your conclusion? What data are you using to make that decision? How can you make that decision without data? And I'm often looking for what numbers tell us what we need to know. What anecdotal data tells us what we know? It is all of those numbers that I just summarized that help us celebrate everything that has gone well this year and accept everything that we need to still do. And the best part about this work is that there is still work to do. Next year, we look to continue the implementation, of course, of CT-SEDS, and I talked about how that will expand to include all programs. In each of our areas of goal work with mindset, we hope to increase our in-district programs, adjust them based on the students who are here today, knowing that the programs of 10 years ago may not be appropriate. The programs from last year may not be appropriate. We need to meet children where they are. We will continue to study the disproportionality areas to reduce those disproportionalities. We will engage in development of professional learning for admin and teachers. We're really looking forward to systems-wide cross-section and collaboration in standards-based instruction for everyone. I say for students with disabilities here, but please know this is inclusive of all students who are designated as MLL, students who are gifted, students who don't have a acronym attached to them except for love, and that everyone will be able to access that instruction. We strive to continue to become more coherent and succinct in the work we do. I said earlier this year, I look forward to re-engaging in SpEd Pack. I am not going into the first day of the next school year without it starting again. I was recruiting earlier this morning with a person who surprised me with a visit, and I look forward to his collaboration with us. I hope to replicate in some fashion the advisory groups that the superintendent holds currently. She creates space for principals to come together to share with her their experiences in intimate groups. And I really hope to be able to do that with building leaders and also with teachers. And if I can really pull off a feat, I would love to bring paras together. We have so much celebration to do for our paraprofessionals in the classrooms, and I really need to learn from them. We want to formalize our student evaluation process. We have some work to do with our systems of reporting, and I think that together we can come up with a system that will allow us to dive more deeply through our evaluation process when we're referring and reevaluating students, and I look forward to that. We will continue creating and publishing our procedures and adding to that list of successes. And of course, we will continue to scream from the top of every mountain and building that special education is not a building and that it is a service, creating spaces of learning for students to return home to their neighborhood schools and supporting that work of co-teaching and inclusion. I'm not going to speak at all to this slide because I want us to have some time for any other questions, but I leave for your reference. These are the overarching goals that we have submitted to the state of Connecticut in our grant cycle for our IDEA grant. And this truly encapsulates all of the work with a special emphasis on comprehensive coordinated early intervening services. These are referred to as CCEIS activities These are funds that we will identify or activities that we will engage in to increase our ability in early childhood referral and ensuring that the programs that we're placing students in are exactly accurate. And that's probably a conversation for another day. So thank you. I'm going to take a sip of water and a breath, and please have any questions. Oh, thank you. I'll stop sharing unless you want me to go back to
I
a
do.
slide.
This is Erica. I do have a question.
Erica.
Yes. So it's a two-part question. As the data comes in as we close out the year, do you think we can regularly feed updates to the Common Council about how the stats are shifting? So I think I heard you say, we increased a half a percentage point or a percentage point on the number of kids who were identified in the system, just so they aren't blindsided. In December, we're regularly sending them these numbers on how things look. And could we include in that stat just not the quantity of students as a percentage point, but perhaps a stat around workload versus caseload? So we can go back to them and say, listen, we may have only gone up a half a percentage point, but the complexity of these cases has resulted in us forecasting that the workload is going to increase, by X percent. Is there something to that end that we could put together and just regularly feed them throughout Q4?
So I'm going to jump in just because this has been one of the conversations going through the process this year. Really, how can we not just Common Council, but how can we make it more public information so that anyone can see some of these data points? And we've been working with our data and analytics team, who's been able to create some of our graphs that we talk about, but in a way that can be updated and we can put them on our website, and really something that is public facing so that people will be able to see this information. So I think that is one component, because the first time we talk about some of these data points shouldn't just be at the budget time. It should be conversations that are available for people to pull and people to see, so that they know what's happening and they can see some of the data trends and they can see some of those layers and components. So that's one of the areas that we're hoping, as we roll out our website, that will be included. I've been given a template draft at this point. We were tweaking it a little bit, but by the end of this year, it will be able to be added, because it's connected through PowerSchool and really able to just highlight some of those components, because we put out a lot of data and a lot of graphs and a lot of charts, but it really was, for a lot of people, the first time that they even saw those components. And so we want it to be more of numbers of students in our specialized programs, for example, is one specific chart that we can highlight. Prevalence rate is another chart that we can highlight. Some of those other components that we've talked about throughout the process. So that's one. And then we have shifted our focus in providing support in buildings from one that looked at students to one that looked at workload, for the exact reason that you're talking about, Erica, because not all students, one student could have 2.5 hours, or one student could have 20 hours of support. And so you can't just say number of students. It's just not. So you could say this special education teacher has 15 students, and another teacher could have 15 students, but the workload could be extremely disproportionate. And so in terms of determining support, we've started to look at that layer to determine number of teachers, number of supports, so that they are getting what they need. And in terms of making that piece visible, I think that we can, as a team, can really brainstorm what that's going to look like, because I think that's a good point. Because granted, what I will say is you can see our prevalence rate is going up. And so that alone, I know that the question is, well, are the numbers going up or are they the same? But we're seeing that the numbers are going up. Like we can see that, and it's a very similar trend at the state level. So across the state, we're seeing the prevalence rate go up. And we're in alignment with that piece. But how do we try and highlight the workload hours so that people can see what that means? That's a great question.
Can you pull out of the system the number of hours that has been allocated in IEP so we can say, the number of kids identified may have only gone up, half a percentage, but the number of hours that are now booked in IEPs in totality has gone up.
Yes.
X percent. Maybe that's the way we look at it, to be reflective of workload.
Yeah, I think that's a great other data point to bring in. I mean, because here's the thing: when we say we only went up 0.5%, we went up 70 students. So
Right.
I want to put a number on it too, not just looking at the percentage. We went from 1,710 students last year to 1,780.
1780.
So I think that piece is important, because it's not just a handful of kids. We're talking 70 more students this year than we had last year. And yes, what are the hours that adds as well? It's because it's not just the number of students, it's what we're providing for those students as well.
And we use that metric in our conversation and in our planning, and we can certainly find a way to be transparent with that as well as we move forward.
That is,
I think that's a really powerful number to share with anybody who's a decision maker in the budget process next year, because these identified children, the complexity of the cases is just getting so much more significant that the student to teacher ratio it really needs to be considered, as part of what we present, because 70 kids and even half a percentage, that doesn't necessarily sound, especially if it's consistent with the rest of the state, that may not seem like a compelling number to somebody, but to see the hours jump, which I suspect that they have, and put some financials behind the value of those hours, I think that's going to really drive home, the significance of what we're looking at.
Definitely. Thank you so much for that, Erica. I appreciate it.
I appreciate that nuanced talk that Erica presented and your response to it, Rob. What I would encourage also is, when it came up on how many students we had out of district, that data point is interesting too, and it was not that easy to find in our budget discussion over the last month or so. So it came up in Bridget's report, exactly how many out of district. That's helpful too. Just flag that.
Great.
Janine, or I don't know if there's any other questions.
No, I didn't have a question. I just wanted to really thank Bridget for all the work that she's been doing and come in for this year, and the team and everything that they presented to us over the year. It's been so thorough, and I know that everyone is working so hard to go through these changes and just, make the program as best as it can be. And, really hitting home that, again and again, that it's not a place, so that I think that we can really keep hammering that home. And Bridget, great job. Great job. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Oh, thank you.
It's a standing ovation, Bridget.
Oh.
If I could stand up and still be in the Zoom picture, I would do
My
it.
husband always says that if you love what you do, it's never work. And he feels that way about running into buildings, and so do I. Thank you so much. I feel grateful to do this work, and I'm happy to do it together with you. So thanks for your time, and I'll see you soon. Thank you to everyone who's listening.
Yes, thank you to everybody. And I believe that, everyone, I'll see some of you soon. And some of you will not see till the fall, that might be out there. So enjoy your summer. And I think that wraps it up for us. And have a good night.
Have a good night. Thank you, everyone.